There wasn't much forecasting of a war, in my view. It just crept up on us, but there were various rumblings in Poland and here and there. And when the thing happened, it was, to me, quite almost unexpected that it would come to a war. Most of us felt that we should do something about it. We didn't like the sound of what Germany was getting up to. Many people told us that the war would be over by Christmas, but that that wasn't exactly what happened. We had about 3 months training. We went up to Waiouru, which was a freezing cold place. I think I was quite pleased. No point in joining an army to combat a nasty enemy unless you're going to get stuck into it. I had a friend, a lady that I intended to marry. She was a pacifist. And when I joined the army, that wasn't regarded as a very good thing. I tried to get engaged, but she wouldn't have it on because I was a soldier. I left overseas bereft, there was no chance of marrying her. And we thought we'd get over there and demolish this German lot. We thought we'd go to Poland. In fact, some chaps were studying Polish. The whole place seemed dirty. People were openly using the toilet in the streets. On the other hand, it had very good facilities. Restaurants and bars and those such things were top grade, so we took advantage of that. I loved the desert. I used to, especially at nights, I didn't sleep. If we had tents or huts, I used to sleep out in the open. I did enjoy certain features of it, like sandstorms. I had one which took 5 days when we virtually couldn't breathe. We got on quite well with the locals, the Bedouins. I found the desert a place that I was quite pleased to be in. A tidy place to have a war. One job we did was dig a canal which was supposed to be a tank trap. We were not very enthusiastic because we thought, no, this won't stop the tanks, and a decent sandstorm would fill it up. It was one of these very futile things that the army do, possibly with the excuse of training. But we all felt that we were wasting our time digging this great hole. We realised that our war was going to be in Egypt. That's where the Italians were playing hell, and we were rather annoyed when the Australians came down from Palestine, where they were, and they took part in the first action in Egypt against the Italians. And we had done all the desert training, and they hadn't done much. Quite early in the piece, we did an attack at a place called El Dudar, and we made contact with the Tobruk garrison, and it was a first time we had casualties. My best friend got killed there, a fellow called Max Hill. That was the first experience of losing friends killed and wounded. And we didn't have very many casualties, but they picked out as far as my friends were concerned, the top two, I suppose. Yeah, pretty hard, but we were sort of, you get fairly inured to the life in the army is you train not to think too much. Not exactly angry, just a bit saddened, and how lucky I am. We had a fairly close contact with the enemy, and I always got a Tommy gun rather than bayonets were used, but they never, to my knowledge, anybody actually used it, plunged a bayonet into another enemy. Any people that we killed were either throwing grenades at us or firing rifle things at us, and we regard them like mosquitoes. We never ever had proper aeroplane support in Egypt. The planes were Gloucester Gladiators, almost First World War planes, which were slower than the Italian fighters. We were losing ground in the desert, and everything was a loser. We were given a job of occupying this ridge, which was said to be a key position, and we had to go at night a mile, several miles, 6 or 8 miles I think, and we got to the objective. I was the navigator, and I took great pleasure in feeling that we'd got to the right spot. Other battalions were somewhat astray, and it was a place where you couldn't dig. It was rock, and we couldn't dig any sort of protection, so we piled up a few rocks and we couldn't have a slit trench. The enemy had got hold of British anti-tank guns, and they were firing these things at us, and one that landed very close to me, and I was deafened, as was my signals officer. Waiting for the tanks to come, the British tanks were supposed to support us. They didn't arrive, and the enemy arrived with a lot of tanks, and made it obvious that we were going to be captured. I was the only officer at the headquarters, and so I was the one that acknowledged that we were going to be wiped out by these tanks if we didn't surrender. We just stood up, and the tanks surrounded us, and we were marched off. The decision was made for me, really. We could see that there was we had nothing with which to deal with tanks. There were a huge number of battalion guards, and we were. And they were all, so many that escape seemed to be a difficult idea. The nights were pretty cold, and I managed to steal a number of blankets which were packed into a container in the side of the truck, and we had some blankets, which was a cause of great moaning from the Italians. They were freezing. We had with us a British pilot, and we asked him, "Can you fly these planes?" And he said he thought he could. And we thought we could charge these guards and throw them out of the door, and this guy could take over. Unfortunately, the last minute, he was removed and put on another plane. So we didn't throw the guards out of the plane, and we landed quietly in a place called Lecce in the southern tip of Italy. When we had an indignity of being marched through the town, and he's flown, carried through the town with all the natives jeering us. We're there reconciled to become prisoners of war, which is a great stigma. And also the prospects of getting out seemed pretty grim. There were so many guards and so many deterrents. It was pretty dusty and hot, and hardly any decent accommodation, and not much food, and nasty guards. It wasn't too well organised in the camp, and more and more prisoners kept arriving, far too many for the accommodation and the food. I thought we'd probably get sick, die, because the food was lousy, and we were deteriorating in health and in fitness, and skinny as that sort of thing. But that was a worse thought than being shot or done in for any other reason. We didn't know where we were going to, and nor did the Italians, I think. But I was shot off to a place called Sulmona, which was an established camp with a number of Australians there. And we thought, well, they were very standoffish. We found out later on that they were digging a tunnel. And when we arrived, it was very near completion. It was outside of the wall of the camp, and they were scared that we would try and muscle in on the tunnel. Quite rightly scared. A peasant with a donkey and a cart drove over this exit, the tunnel exit, and collapsed the wall, collapsed the tunnel. And that was the end of the tunnel, and after that the Aussies became quite friendly. I would say it would be about a month or two, some later. And then we were shot off to the Po Valley, Modena. We lived in bunks, upstairs and downstairs. We became highly organised. Our internal operations. There was committees for everything, escape committee, and any escapes had to be referred to the committee. And if it was too silly, turned down. Apart from the fact that the food was pretty light, we were able to have a fairly reasonable existence there. We played a fair bit of sport. If you woke up in the morning, you didn't know if there's any food at all. You didn't have any breakfast, for example, but sometime during the day there'd be a cry go up, "Skilly up!" Skilly was a mixture of some sort of meat, God knows whether it was horse, and a little bit of macaroni, and we'd go and get dished out this stuff, which was the main meal of the day, or the only meal of the day really. we were taken out for walks through the countryside, and a group of South Africans organised an escape, which was they were going through some quite narrow lanes with bush and stuff, and they during one of these things they jostled the guards a lot, which enabled people to get into the shrubbery, and about 20 guys were liberated themselves. We had hidden about 20 guys in a basement during all the roll calls, and some weeks before this escape we had told the Italians that 20 guys had escaped. So there wasn't much of a hue and cry when these guys did escape. They all turned up back in the camp within a couple of weeks. They all got recaptured. So it was rather discouraging for would-be escapers. When the armistice took place, there was a great confusion in the camp, and they didn't know what's going to happen to them. The prisoners thought they might be let loose because the British had landed in the south and were moving north pretty quickly. We knew that the Italians had surrendered, but we didn't expect the Germans to turn up. We thought they had virtually left Italy themselves because they'd been losing the war, but they were there in great numbers, and started sending the prisoners off in batches to Germany. Another guy and I climbed up the drain pipe and took some tiles off the ceilings and got inside the ceiling, and we hid there. And my friend that I'd selected to do this job with me got cold feet and pulled out, so I enrolled my friend Hugh Flower to take his place. He couldn't lie down. You couldn't put your foot on and he'd sit on the rafters. He couldn't sit on the. He'd go through the ceiling, and the Germans were in the room down below, so that was not a very good idea to come falling through the ceiling. So it's rather uncomfortable trying to balance on these bits of wood for hours at a time. We were there when the last batch went off. We got downstairs to have a look around and see what was happening. Unfortunately, a number of Germans were left in the camp, and I was intending to go back, but Hugh said, "Bugger this, let's see if we can get out." The difficulty was about a 14-foot wall, and on top of that there was barbed wire rails, and we looked around the place, and we noticed that someone had cut the wire. So we, on the spur of the moment, made a hurried jump and managed to jump up this 14-foot thing and get hold of something and climb onto the top and over the other side. From then onwards, we drifted down through Italy. We didn't go very fast. We didn't cover very many miles a day. Yeah, we tended to go into the bush. There's some excellent mountain tracks which were going in the right direction. It kept off the major roads all the time. It was usually not a big family. We'd say, "We are two British officers escaped from the Germans." And we would like to, can we come in? The word Germans was enough to get us a welcome. Had all sorts of strange meals. This single guy, his meal was a pot of potatoes, which were boiled, then poured onto the table, and you just helped yourself to a potato. That was the meal. In other places, they made polenta, which is a cornmeal mixed up and boiled, and they poured that onto the table, and it made a sort of map of Australia. And they had some little bits of bacon dotted around it. And the idea was to scrape the stuff. You weren't allowed to go and dive into the bacon. You had to eat your way to the bacon. And Hugh Flower hated this polenta. I found it quite good. We heard of other people being recaptured a little lot. There'd be the odd guy wandering around, fellow prisoners, some British, kept bumping into them. And they'd tell you some nasty stories about people who'd been recaptured, and including a couple of New Zealanders, friends. So there's always back of your mind, you might make a mistake and then walk into the wrong company. We managed occasionally to get into a place where they had a radio, and we got the BBC News pretty irregularly, very irregularly. So we had a smattering of where they were, what sort of speed they were going. We had a rough map, and it took us to a town which I'd found out, or someone had told me. We'd yarned to all these people we met that it was full of the fascists, the black shirts, and it not a good place to be. So I decided that it'd be better if we didn't go there. That meant climbing another great mountain and going somewhere else, and Hugh was not very keen on that idea. So he didn't speak much Italian, and I said, I'm convinced it would be a disaster to go there. And he said, I'm bloody well going. I said, well, cheerio. And he set off, and I set off, and then I said, oh, you'll out, don't be so bloody silly. You're only going to get into trouble. So we teamed up again, and that was the only sort of falling out we had. Somewhere near Florence, we met some people who said, you should go up to the monastery and they'll look after you. So we climbed this quite a large mountain, and we were greeted to this monastery by a group of very friendly monks, and they invited us in and gave us grog and a meal, and met a whole lot of people there, all sorts of people who were sort of sheltering there. A lady came over to me and said, if I were you, I would get out of here as soon as possible. The brigadier of the Carabinieri in the town below here is fed up with the number of people like me that are sheltering in this monastery, and he's about to pounce. I said, oh, well, we'll leave tomorrow. And she said, I think you better leave now. I think it's so urgent that you should leave now. Pouring with rain, and we're up this pretty high country. We staggered off into the rain and got out of it. We came to the great thing called the Myella Mountain and its foothills, and we met up with some other English prisoners, and they said that it was impossible to get over this next stage because it was Mussolini was hiding there, and they were looking for him. It was chock-a-block with soldiers. The general feeling among these prisoners that we're buggered. We couldn't go any further. I said, let's give it a go. And we got over some pretty heavy mountains, some rather difficult mountains. We decided we'd go to the top highest point where we thought they'd be free of any civilization or people. We came to a cave which was full of Yugoslav. They were hiding there, and they'd killed a beast of some kind, and they were eating it more or less raw. And we stayed in there with them for a day or a night anyway, and we're glad to get away from them. Then we climbed over a few more mountains, and we were damn lucky because we didn't have any gear for the snow. And went down into a nice valley, came across an isolated farmhouse and made ourselves known. Very friendly people, and we spent some weeks there. We were quite well looked after by this family. We ate quite well, and we were very fond of them. Yeah, and they were very fond of us. The place was owned by another family who were living in the town up the top of the hill, which is being bombed very heavily, and she moved into the peasant's house with her daughter, and we had great plans that Hugh was to marry this daughter, and I said, what about me? And there was an old cook there, so they had this old Maria the cook. I'm supposed to marry her. We hadn't got over the critical part of this mountain. It was pretty big, and we decided we'd have a go at it. And we knew the British were over the other side because they were firing their bombs, their shells at us. We got up this hill, and it got so bad with cold and everything else that we turned around and went back. And the village people, the farm that we're at, they were absolutely distressed that we had left them. They thought that we were left there because they weren't going to look after us properly and shield us from the Germans. They were greeted us with open arms and tears, and so we're a bit diffident about having another go. Nevertheless, we decided we'd have another crack at this mountain. We ran into these paratroopers, British paratroopers who were acting as mountain troops. And we said, where are you based? Oh, we're attached to the New Zealand division, which was a great shock and pleasure. They took us back to their headquarters, and we ran into my old battalion. We got carted off to General Freiberg. He was very receptive and congratulatory and all that sort of thing. And I said, we're looking forward to going back to... Unfortunately, my battalion, the 19th Battalion, the 22nd Battalion, had become the 22nd Armoured. and they'd become a tank regiment, and I didn't know anything about tanks. Anyway, Freiberg said, all prisoners of war will go back to New Zealand. So we were told to go back to New Zealand. She had been in the advertising business, and she had thought this is not a very useful business to have in regard to the fact there's a war on, so she went and trained as a nurse. And I went up to her hospital in the Waikato Hospital, and she had been nursing all these wounded soldiers, and she came to the conclusion that they were sort of reasonable guys, you know. And we got engaged. We did get engaged. I was dead keen to get back to the war. I had unfinished business, and things are looking up. The war, as far as the war was concerned, it was going in the right direction. I wasn't supposed to go back. No prisoners of war were supposed to be back into action again. But they didn't. They forgot that I was a prisoner of war, and they called me up as a 13th reinforcement or something. When I got back, there was a bit of a ruckus. What the hell are you doing here? You know, you shouldn't. There's some sort of convention about prisoners not going back into action again. And I didn't subscribe to that. They were a pretty rough war, but when I was there, we were going ahead. Who were winning? We were doing a whole lot of river crossings, which was quite tricky, with the engineers doing a great job with bridges, and so we got right up through Italy, across the Po Valley, fighting from village to village and this sort of thing, and rather than open country in the desert. And it was very different too, because we had proper air support, and so it was different, a very different war from the desert, where we had hardly any air support. And then I got told that I was to go home. My fiancée wrote and said, I am planning to go to England to meet my mother. So I was in the position where, if the cookie crumbled one way, she and I would pass in the Indian Ocean. I said, I wish to apply for a transfer to the Prisoner of War Reception Committee, because I've got knowledge of prisoner of war psychology, having been one, and I'd be an ideal person to work in this unit in England. And in due course, I got the job. So that was the end of my war.